Welcome to the Being Resilient podcast with your host, Stephanie Olson.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Olson, and I'm excited to introduce to you Christina Stathopoulos. Christina is a professional certified coach and an accomplishment coaching certified coach. She holds degrees with high honors in chemistry and English from Mount Holyoke College. In her business, Hear Her Roar, Christina specializes in working with millennial women who have taken on a new leadership role and are facing the common struggles of managing a team, having executive presence, leading people towards a goal, letting go of doing all the do. In addition to her private practice, she serves the next generation of coaches and leaders as a leader in training of accomplishment coaching's coach and leadership training program. When she is somehow not talking about coaching or leadership, you can find her brewing beer, sneaking more plants into her office, eating delicious meals with her husband, crying over cute dogs on Instagram, or setting a few witchy intentions. So let's listen to this interview with Christina Stathopoulos. Hello, welcome to the Being Resilient podcast. And I am so excited to have Christina Stathopoulos with us. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Oh, yes. Okay, very good. And I'm really excited to hear about her story because on her website, so I'm going to let her tell you all of this, but hearherroar.net, one of the first things you see says, I was 23 years old and burned out. So that is not a good place to be. And I would just love to hear a little bit about your story and what you are doing and how you are resilient, what that looks like in your life.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stephanie. So, I guess to kick things off, what a way to start a website, right?
I love it. It's eye-catching. It's eye-catching, right?
Yeah, well, I guess to share a little bit about me and, share where a sentence like that even comes from. So I was privileged and fortunate enough to go to college. And I went to Mount Holyoke College. It's one of the original Seven Sisters. And so I'll never forget, first day on campus orientation, I got told, hey, Christina, it doesn't matter that you're a woman. It doesn't matter that you're queer. It doesn't matter that you're a child of immigrants. Your voice matters. And you can go and do and be whatever you want to be, and your leadership is necessary and your voice is necessary.
I was expecting you to say the exact opposite, so that's great to hear. Okay,
yeah.
Very good.
So it was great to hear, because there I got to spend 4 years on a campus that was like, you rock, you're amazing, and we want you to shine. And then in 2014, I graduated and I hit the streets of New York City, all bright-eyed and optimistic, thinking my voice matters. And as it turned out, employment didn't speak quite the same language that my campus had spoken. And and the most startling part to me was, here I was, having been told my whole life, you worked so hard, you have 2 degrees, you're going to crush it. And I actually, not a lot of people know this, I spent the first 8 months after my graduation unemployed.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I couldn't land a job. I actually had to take my degrees off my resume just to get a job at a cosmetic store in a mall, so that I at least had something to do. I was living with my parents. I was just like,
not really atypical, not that atypical. So wow. That's a great place to be though.
It was. And so, I did all I could think to do, which is hustle, network. And I finally landed a position in a late stage startup. And I was like, phew, okay. Like I figured this out. It was run by another Greek American woman. And so I was thinking, here's a mentor, here's someone that's going to really lift me up and empower me. And that's when the opposite happened. That's when I had this really, really soul crushing experience of working in a company that People above me would belittle me. They would belittle my ideas. They would tell me things wouldn't work and then go ahead and use them anyway and credit themselves. And then in addition to that, as I mentioned, I was living at home at the time with my parents in New Jersey. And so I had these sometimes 2, sometimes 3-hour commutes.
Sure.
In both directions. And that sentence, like that first part on my website of being burnt out, it's not just like a catchy thing to say. Like I actually still have this visceral memory of like a Wednesday night. I finally made it home. It was like 8:30 p.m. I hadn't even eaten dinner yet. I was laying on the floor of my bedroom and a girlfriend had texted me asking if I wanted to go get drinks. And I told her really candidly, I was like, hey, I just got home. I haven't eaten yet. And I've got to be up again in 7.5 hours. And I don't think I have it in me. And I can still remember how it felt to just start crying on my floor. And it was just from this like, wait a minute, like I've worked so freaking hard all these years, was told the hard work would pay off. When is that going to happen? Yeah. What is the way out here?
Yeah. Wow. So, and I think that I'm excited to hear the rest of your story because I have a feeling that was probably a moment that was really kind of a crossroads for you. I think it's so interesting because we do have those expectations, and we have it with everything, right? I mean, we've got it with work, we've got it with parenting, we've got it with relationships, that it's going to look a certain way and it's going to go like this. And when it doesn't, that can be pretty devastating. Yeah. So, okay. So you're crying on your floor. You're thinking, this is not going the way I expected it to go. Then what?
Yeah. So then, I just started asking myself, well, maybe there isn't like some golden ticket opportunity waiting for me to find somewhere. Like maybe I have to go create it. Maybe I have to go do it. And so I took the only thing I knew really, which was a lot of women's empowerment, having had the college experience that I had, and then having some basic event coordinating ability because of this job that I had in this startup.
Yeah.
And I started putting together these women's empowerment events.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And, again, here I was in New York City having no idea what the heck I was doing and everything was very expensive to do. So I think I'm trying to remember, I think my first event had like a grand total of 4 people, one of which was my mother, right?
Which is okay, right? My daughter lives in New York. I know it's if you could make it there, man.
You can make it anywhere. Yeah. I'm a cliche for a reason. But yeah, like I kept swinging and missing, swinging and hitting, just trying a bunch of things. And lo and behold, I was doing interviews for this panel. And I met this woman who was calling herself a life coach. And I feel like this was just before anyone and everyone started using coaching as like a term that was out and about. And so I was like, I don't know what that means. Could you explain this to me a little bit more? And the bottom line is the next thing I knew, we had so much in common and so much synergy that we were producing a lot of events together.
Wow.
And one day after a particularly successful event that we had held, it was like a cold night in November. I remember her turning to me and just saying, like, Christina, have you ever thought of becoming a coach? Have you ever thought of not just hosting events where other women get to make a difference, but you get to make a difference? And I was like, I don't even know how to do that. Do I have to go back to school? So long story short, basically a year later, I was graduating from a coach training program that I went through. And yeah, I'm fortunate enough to say that now for about the last 5.5 years, I've been running my own leadership coaching business. As you mentioned, it's called Hear Her Roar. And I'm just especially passionate about working with women leaders that seek to have bold voices and that have an impact, but that don't need to make that impact at the cost of their own joy or satisfaction. That's a really big thing for me.
Absolutely. And I think, so many times there's this real conflict with that sometimes, and especially as women, I would think. So now, are most of your clients, do you coach with groups? Do you coach with individuals, or both, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I do a mix of both individual coaching and group coaching. I love both of them for very different reasons. I think what's really special about groups is that you kind of automatically build a community for yourself because you're working with other people that are up to similar things as you.
Right.
But at the same time, I love the one-on-one attention that I get to have with clients because you just get to know them really intimately. You get to learn their dreams. You get to hear a lot of their fears and insecurities. And when you're one-on-one with a coach, you just get so much personalized attention that way.
I love that. So talk to me about the difference between a coach and a counselor. I mean, what are, and I,
yeah, so there's a pretty funny analogy I like to use when I talk to people about the distinctions between coaching and counseling, or even coaching and consulting, which I think is the other one that gets confused with a lot. And this is going to sound so silly, but one way I like to think of it is, imagine that one day you fell into a hole.
Okay, I do it almost daily, but go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. So like, imagine one day you fell into a hole. How a counselor, a consultant, and a coach would address you in the hole is what makes them different.
Okay. I like
so.
Okay.
For example, a counselor or a therapist might go, "Oh no, I see you've fallen into a hole. How does that make you feel? What memories does that bring up for you with regards to other times that you've fallen into holes? Does being in the hole remind you of, when you fell or embarrassed yourself in front of your father?" Like it becomes a very feelings-based conversation, emotions-based, past-based. And I have it that counselors and therapists, they're trained with the primary incentive to heal the people that they work with. Whereas then, say I was a consultant, and I'd be like, "Hey, Stephanie, I've seen you fallen into this hole. Do you want the best method to climb back out of it? Because if you do, I can tell you it's this ladder. I could tell you it's this rope I'm going to lower down for you." As you can see, I'm looking.
I love this. I love it.
So I'm looking for your problem. I'm assuming it's to get out of the hole. And I'm here to tell you the most effective way to do it based on the ways that I know how to do it. Okay. So that's consulting, expert driven, etc. Where me as a coach, I walk past you and I go, "Hey, Stephanie, have you noticed that you're in a hole? Where would you like to be? Once you're out of the hole, what do you want to do next? Like, what's available in life outside of this hole?" So it's open-ended, it's curious. I'm not making any assumption that you actually want to be in or out of it. I'm just curious, like, "Hey, where are you going from here? What do you want to do?"
I love that, because it really does put the ownership on the other person. You're not telling them what to do. You're not telling them how to do it. You're really just opening up kind of the opportunity to make some decisions that maybe you haven't even thought about yet.
Exactly. And, I think what's great about coaching is it's not a one size fits all approach. Like, I don't like, people often ask me like, "Well, what's the signature program that you sell?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I don't actually sell signature programs, simply because like, I don't believe clients are a one size fits all. What works for me may not be what works for you. And if I assume, at least as a coach, right? Like if I assume that it will work for you, I might miss out on you helping me learn something different."
So have you ever been in a situation where you're coaching somebody, it seems to be going well, and then all of a sudden you hit some trauma that maybe they didn't even realize was there? And how do you handle something like that?
Yeah, so it's definitely something that's come up before, especially if I have clients who maybe have never done any kind of personal or professional development work. That seems to be the most common, like, "Surprise, you're traumatized." Surprise, the thing has come up. And what I always tell people is that you can absolutely 110% still be coached if you have trauma. If you couldn't, I don't know how coaches would have gigs, because most of us have, whether it's big T or little t, something that has gone on.
We all have to, and trauma is trauma is trauma. I mean, we all have it.
With that being said, I am not a trained counselor or therapist. So I'm not actually trained in modalities to heal your trauma, regulate your trauma, resolve your trauma. I'm not even trained to diagnose you, right? Like, I think one of the most common occurrences of this is I'll have clients that'll use like language that kind of sends up some flags for me. Like they'll say like, oh, this makes me super, super anxious. I've been really depressed about this. And rather than try to diagnose them, it's my job to just pause and go, hey, I've noticed you've used this language a couple times. Is that just vernacular for you, or is there an experience that you're having? And at that point, it's up to me to be humble enough to actually like pause and ask, what other resources they have, if they've ever considered being supported by a therapist or a similar professional in that manner. And if anything, I always tell people that like therapy plus coaching, I think, is the winning combo for a lot of us.
Therapy is always good. And if you can add something else to that, I think that is a great thing. Absolutely. So now I love your website, by the way.
Thank you.
You definitely all have to go on hearherroar.net because it is excellent. And I know you wrote about this, but one of the things that I am really interested in, I talk about resilience in life and leadership. And sometimes we put leadership in a box. Like leadership is being a CEO, leadership is doing this, but we're leaders in our family life. We're leaders in, our whatever it might be we're doing. And you wrote a blog saying what my pregnancy taught me about leadership. I would love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. Oh my God. So I'm still learning from it. So,
and you will continue to yes.
Forever and a day, the ultimate leadership training program, yes. Motherhood. Yeah. So I am very blessed to have a little 4-month-old baby girl at home as we speak. She's being very quiet downstairs with grandma.
that is well done right there. Mm-hmm.
Yes, but part of what inspired me comparing pregnancy to leadership is, everyone has their own track, right? Like some people became mothers first and then get into a career. Others had a career, then entered motherhood. We all have our own journey. Mm-hmm. For me, it was this funny thing where I happened to be in this realm of leadership coaching and leadership training for about 4.5 years. And then I decided to get pregnant. And on one hand, all of this training made me like really well equipped to like have the conversations that I needed to have. But on the other hand, being pregnant and going through the journey of growing another human, birthing another human, taking a parental leave, all the nuts and bolts really taught me a lot about new ways to be an effective leader. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned is, you mentioned that a lot of people put leadership in a box. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the ways we put leadership in a box is we assume that when you're the leader, you can't need anything. You have to have it all figured out and all together.
Yep.
And what I learned from growing a human is oftentimes you don't have it all figured out.
Most of the times. That's correct. Yes.
Or all together. And as someone that was always like a big overachiever type, especially in certain trimesters in my pregnancy where I didn't have as much energy, I had a lot of aches and pains. I couldn't go through call after call after call, back and forth the way that I used to. Like I had to learn, first of all, I need to slow down and that needs to be okay. But second of all, if I still want to be producing as much, I need to learn how to communicate to the people around me. These are my needs. This is how I want my experience of my leadership to go, or my experience of my pregnancy to go. How can you help me? Who am I not turning to that's, in my circle that wants me to win because I've always done it myself.
Right. That's really good. So what I hear you saying is that we in obviously pregnancy, but really every aspect of leadership or life in general, we need to be able to ask for help when we need it.
We need to be able to say, okay, I'm in over my head. But I think there's such a stigma sometimes to really, if I ask for help, it means that I am failing somehow. If I ask for help, it means I'm not doing what I need to do. And my guess is that you really do talk about that quite a bit in your coaching. What would you say to somebody who is saying, yeah, I might need to ask for help, but I really, I need to do it all, or it will only get done well if I do it. And it has to be done the right way. What would you say to somebody?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, I think what you're pointing to, that's probably the most common conversation I have with most of my clients, because they are all leaders in some way.
Yeah.
And I've found that there are kind of like archetypes or different ways in which that, like, no, I can't ask, or no, it has to be me, shows up. And I call them little leadership gremlins.
I love that. Yeah.
But really, like, it's all forms of self-sabotage. And I find like you're usually in a couple different categories. Either you're not asking for help because you need to be a martyr, because that's how you prove you're valuable.
Yeah.
You're not asking for help because you're a perfectionist. And so if someone else is going to do it for you, if they don't do it your way, then it's the highway. Or, then the other group is like people pleasers.
Yeah.
Like, no, I can't ask for help because, like, then I'm putting a burden on someone and then they're not going to like me anymore, or whatever the case may be. So I think for each client, I would first get clear on that, like what's actually the block to getting the help. And then once we're clear on what that block is, I think to each person, it's that unique experience of like, hey, I hear you loud and clear. And it sounds like you doing it this way has run its course. Like, here's how successful you can be doing it that way, or here's how far you can scale your business doing it that way, or but here's all the other things that you're saying you're wanting that isn't actually going to be possible unless you change it up.
Right. So you've been doing this now for about 5.5 years. And so tell me, what a drastic change that had to have been, being in the, corporate world, working for the man, and then all of a sudden you're working for yourself with a partner, and you're putting on events. I'm sure that just is a huge change in everyday life.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is at first it wasn't, in a way. And I think it was because, as I mentioned, I was a recovering overachiever. I was used to like reporting to someone, or needing to work really hard, or get straight A's, or be the best team player, whatever, for some authority figure.
Right.
And what I found was, when I first entered entrepreneurship and I didn't have like that boss or that teacher or that whomever anymore, that like I became it. Like, I would start talking myself down or being like, all right, Christina, like, you don't get to pay yourself until XYZ happens. Like, I just became my own police in my head.
Absolutely. So along with this work that I do on the resilience aspect, I also run a nonprofit that does prevention education in the area of human trafficking and social media safety and healthy relationships. And so you do wind up, there's just this different mentality of something that you kind of take on as your own. When you become the boss or whatever it may be, there is a different ownership to it. There's a different changes the whole premise of your work, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's, I think it could be daunting for a lot of people.
Very.
And we all have flavors of it. I think my flavor of it, especially because, as I mentioned, it's not like I was particularly old or had been through that many other careers before I started to give this a shot. My biggest confrontation was just that imposter syndrome.
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's a big one. Explain that for people who have never experienced that at all.
Well, first of all, send me an email. I'd love to know your trade secrets, but
Ignore them. Ignore.
Yeah.
That's it.
But yeah, like imposter syndrome, really just that sense, like that question in your head of like, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Or like, you're way too young to be doing that, or men do that, women don't do that, or well, so and so already does what you're thinking of doing and they're already so successful, so there's no space for you to be doing that as well. It's just the need to compare and the need to question, like, who the heck are you? What value do you bring to the table to make any of that possible?
Right. That's so good. And the reality is, we know ourselves, we know our strengths, we know our weaknesses. And I think I have a friend who, as a speaker, I have always been pretty public with what I talk about. And I wound up meeting one of the women who used to, be a part of my things. And we became very close, very good friends. And she said to me one day, I always really put you on a pedestal and really admired you. And then I got to know you. It's like, that's what happens. We know ourselves. We know the ins and outs, we know. And so, and we take our worst and we compare it to other people's best. And that's a challenge. Yeah.
It is a challenge. And, I think earlier you were mentioning, remind me again, it was sort of that concept of like, how we as women, especially, we see what other people are up to and we feel like that's not for us.
Yeah.
And I think, or like we feel dumb if we need help.
Right.
And I think that combined with like that pedestal approach of like, put your heroes up here.
Right.
I think that's actually like a version of leadership that's starting to wane. The whole like top down approach of like, that person on the pedestal knows so much more than I do.
Right.
And I am so beneath them because I don't know as much. And I feel like in actuality, when you step off the pedestal, like when people can see that you're a human being, like that's what actually raises them up as well.
I agree.
And so I think for a lot of us, part of like building our resiliencies, whether it's as entrepreneurs or as leaders or as whatever, it's, being willing to be in partnered equal conversations, not I know more, I know less than whoever I'm speaking to.
Exactly. And I think that I always say to people, if someone puts you on a pedestal, you better jump down before you get kicked off, because that's what ultimately happens. We cannot hold that level of glory because it's not a real thing. So that's really good. Okay. So tell me, as we wrap up a little bit, what does resilience mean to you?
Ooh, to me, resilience, I think ultimately means bandwidth. Like it's,
this is perfect from a millennial, right? That's my generation would never say that. This is good. I like it. Okay.
Well, it's funny. So in addition to running my own business, I'm also a trainer. Like I train new coaches out into the world.
Awesome.
And we talk a lot about resilience and bandwidth, specifically the idea of how much you can be with things before you crack or get frustrated or give up or attack or whatever it is. And so when I say bandwidth, it's like, here's all the room that I have to be with when things aren't okay.
Yeah.
We all know the cliche, like a smooth sea's never made a strong sailor. I find that resiliency isn't something that grows when everything's perfect. It's what grows when things aren't perfect.
That's good.
And so as a result, like in order to grow your resiliency, you have to actually screw up. You have to have it not going right all the time. And let me tell you, motherhood or parenthood,
right? Get really good at that screwing up thing. Yes.
Yeah, you'll be an excellent screw up by the time. Even just 4 months in, you too.
And be okay with it. That's the key, right? Because I think that's perfect. And I always say resilience is 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. I mean, it doesn't mean you've arrived. It doesn't mean you've overcome it just means that you're doing the journey and you're doing it well. And when you get knocked back down or pushed in that hole, you get back up, and it's just a constant journey.
Yeah, I love that visual. You know, I tell a lot of clients, they seem to think that resiliency or transformation or growth should be a linear process. Like,
Yeah,
oh, the
right.
more I work on this, the
Right.
better at it I should be.
Right.
When in actuality, like what happens is something super confronting. And so you grow. And now the thing's in your comfort zone again. And
Right.
there's like a plateau. Like you don't need to grow anymore. Like you've figured it out.
Yeah.
And then you hit the next challenge and it's like, oh shoot. you grow and you grow and you grow and you grow and you grow. So there's a constant ebb and flow. It's not linear. And I think part of our work in building resiliency is to not be so surprised or frustrated when it becomes uncomfortable again, or when things are challenging again.
That's good. And I think that's where, you know, sometimes you got to sit in those feelings and you got to get through that moment, and it sucks, but then you really do come out a stronger person from just doing that piece. So, well, Christina, this has been great. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Anything else that you would like to share with the listeners before I ask you to share how they find you?
Let me think. I think just the biggest thing is kind of that last piece we were talking about, which is one of the biggest things necessary to build your resiliency is to not be surprised or hard on yourself when things become challenging again, because it's never an if, ever. Nothing is an if, it's a when.
I love that, actually. Yeah, you got to give yourself grace. And we are the hardest people on ourselves. We're our own worst critics. That is good advice. That is fabulous. So, Christina, how can people find you?
So let's see, you could find me, as Stephanie has been generous enough to mention multiple times now, on my website, hearherroar.net. Alternatively, I am on Instagram at hearxtinaroar, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn at Christina Stathopoulos, PCC.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And listeners, check Christina out. And absolutely, if you need some life coaching, which frankly, we all do, definitely look her up. So thank you so much for being a part of Being Resilient. And listeners, thank you for being a part of our day. We'll talk to you soon.